And it felt like the scriptures had sent me these people, these heroes, to carry me through this really, really hard time.
You know, taking care of him and that time was completely and utterly overwhelming and the greatest privilege of my life. And I wish I were doing it now.
They learn how to think about others. They learn how to see others through the eyes of the Savior.
Hello and welcome to Latter-day Profiles. I'm Brian Howard. We're here on the campus of Brigham Young University, Idaho. And joining me today is Rob Eaton. Rob, welcome.
Good to be with you.
Rob is a great friend. He's been here at BYU Idaho for longer than I have, I think. I came here in 99. How long have you been here?
No, 2004, Brian.
Oh, man, I'm really old. Those assumptions. Rob has been a lot of things, currently religion faculty here at BYU Idaho. Also does a lot in the teaching and learning sphere, is able to help out a lot that way. Has been an associate academic vice president, also mission president of the Washington Federal Away Mission. If I remember correctly, that was a brand new mission, right?
It was, and my hometown.
And your hometown. Oh, yes. I didn't put that together, but
like the only mission president in the church with a parental chaperone.
Well, sometimes probably would be better off that way, but that was, as I recall, brand new. So you got to get all new places for missionaries to live and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure that was quite the challenge.
Well, actually, they're already there. You just take them from two existing missions.
Two existing missions. So
it was still wonderful.
Jumping in. Also worked a lot with online learning here at BYU Idaho, a graduate of BYU and Stanford Law School. So, Rob, let's give people a little bit of background. How'd you find your way to BYU Idaho? What was your background before you came here?
That's a great question. I began my career as an attorney, and then after 7 years of practicing law in Seattle, became an executive at the company where I'd been an attorney most of that time. But I always had a desire to do something of eternal consequence. And I have to be careful to say there are many wonderful, honorable jobs that people have that help build families and build a kingdom. But I felt drawn in the direction of teaching, and in particular teaching religion. So I got a chance to leave the corporate world in 1999 and jump in 2001 and start teaching religion and, institute and seminary in Auburn, Washington.
Oh, okay. They ended up opening here at BYU Idaho 2004 then. You've been here ever since.
Yeah, ever since.
I know you've served in a lot of variety of positions, religion department. You've authored several books, by the way. So we're going to talk about one of those in just a minute that's designed to help both teachers and others to better understand the college experience, especially the mental health of students as they're going through, as it's a major milestone in people's lives, and it's getting more and more difficult. But here you've got an opportunity to serve as associate academic vice president, and also worked with online. How have those experiences kind of shaped where you got now, where you're really able to focus on not only teaching religion, but how to become a better teacher and how to better serve students?
I appreciate you setting up that way instead of saying, it seems like you got a hard time holding down a job, Rob. But I've split my career here, not by choice, but by invitation, about evenly between academic leadership roles in the administration and teaching. And I've loved both of them. And they've all contributed to this, what I hope is this final stage of my career, where I get to spend most of my time teaching religion, but about a quarter of it helping other faculty members improve the way that we teach and learn. Working with Pathway and Online for 4 years, and then certainly overseeing online learning and teaching at BYU Idaho for 4 years, got me focused on thinking more systemically, more intentionally about the things that we do that work and the things that we do as teachers that don't work so well. And then I finally began applying that lens of intentionality to the classroom tactical decisions we make, as well as the course design decisions that we make and how those affect students with mental health. So it's been a joy to me, it's logical, and it's fused together the different portions of my career as I've been able to write some books about this.
Well, one of the things I really love about BYU Idaho, and there are, different pros and cons about any university, but the research that we do is focused on becoming better teachers and better in your discipline, of course, not as much about publishing papers, but you've done a lot of that as well, because the stuff you do is really important in the area of teaching and learning. And you're working on a book that'll come out, I think in the fall. We're taping this now around Memorial Day, but this will come out in the fall.
Spring of 2023.
Spring of 2023. So we'll look for that. So
Victim of the supply chain shortages.
Give me the official title. I have Improving Learning and Mental Health in the College Classroom. Is that our official title?
That's it.
Okay. So that's the new and revised title. And I think it's a big deal, when you're looking at that. What brought this project about? What got you into thinking about we need to focus on learning and the mental health of students?
It's hard for me to trace it precisely, but I think it's got its roots in my service as a mission president, where I had wonderful, wonderful missionaries who struggled mightily with mental health challenges, 48 who needed to go home early with mental health challenges. And in almost every case, they were working so incredibly hard. It was not something they wanted to do. We almost had to persuade them that it was needful for them to go home. That attuned me to this thing that somehow plagued this generation and plagued us today, and got me thinking about it when I saw what an unwelcome guest it was in the lives of these wonderful young people, and what challenges it created for them. When I got back to the classroom after about 7 years away as a full-time teacher, I then noticed just how many of my students were flaming out before the end of the semester, often, almost always, because of mental health challenges. I didn't even know until I started doing the research. I could have figured it out if I thought about it. It was also keeping a good chunk of them from graduating, from earning a college degree. So rather than coming to college and discovering their potential and having their capacity affirmed, many leave with that flame of hope extinguished by college rather than lit by college.
Yeah, I've noticed in the classroom, the beginning of the semester, of course, just like a football season, everyone's undefeated, everyone's got high hopes. But somewhere along in the middle, then there is a regular occurrence that happens where good students who've been doing well kind of just disappear, and it's hard to track down what that is. So that's why I think it's good that you've done the research that you have to help us out.
And then somewhere along the line, we started noticing that changes that we made that were beneficial for all our students could be especially beneficial for students with mental health challenges. And the fact is, there are more good ideas out there than you and I will ever have time to implement in our teaching careers. So it's kind of overwhelming as you go through a stack of all these good ideas from peers and books and articles. So we essentially went through that stack, again with the lens of how will these practices impact or have an effect on students with mental health challenges. And what we found were some strategies that are good for all our students, but especially helpful for students with mental health challenges. I
want to mention your team, Stephen Hunsaker and Bonnie Moon, two faculty members that jumped on board with, and they both have interesting backgrounds. How did you guys get together to work on this project? Did they find you? Did you find them?
I had leave and I invited them. We'd created what we call a think shop here, a group of faculty who for a semester study a single issue together. I was using my leave to study this topic and share that, and Steve and Bonnie had both signed up. Steve really inspired me to get more serious about studying how we learn and teach. Introduced me to what we call the scholarship of learning and teaching. And I hate to admit, for many years as an academic leader, my approach to the scholarship of learning and teaching was asking Steve what he'd learned lately. And I finally started reading the same things Steve was reading and other things myself. So I knew he had to be a part of it. And as I got to know Bonnie and heard her story and was amazed by her capacity, we invited her to join us as a co-author as well.
So let's talk about some of the key things that you learned. You know, some of the, I guess, the key findings. Clearly, we can see that across the board, mental health issues are increasingly, coming to light. Maybe they were always there, but now we know more about them, or maybe environment have changed. I'm not sure what's happened, but it's clearly there. What are some key things that you've discovered in this research?
So I'll throw out one thought in terms of that question, because I've wondered, is this really about the same and we're just treating it differently? Now you get a name for every condition. I got to tell you, the more I've learned about this and the more I've read by true experts in peer-reviewed journal articles, it's changed. And there's some things I can look at, like attempted suicides, emergency room visits for people who've committed self-harm. Those things have changed dramatically over the years. So there could be a little bit more of it's a little safer to talk about it, maybe getting some better treatment in some cases. But on the whole, it looks like this is a genuine change from when you and I were in college. And I think that's an important point for teachers and parents and others to remember, because we tend to judge situations by ourselves. Right. I'll just give you a simple example. Both Steve and I enjoy giving oral presentations. And in our Pakistan class that Steve and I taught together for years, and in many of my religion classes, I required an oral presentation. I love giving oral presentations. Who wouldn't love giving an oral presentation? It turns out people with higher levels of anxiety who aren't planning on becoming teachers don't love giving oral presentations, and it can often create significant stress. Now, if I were teaching communication, I'd still be doing oral presentations, but even then with maybe some tools to work our way up to it. But in our particular course, it wasn't really that central. In fact, after Steve and I kind of graduated from that course, our successors made a subtle but wonderful change. they're making the course a hybrid course, so 1 credit would be out of class. Rather than have students do the oral presentation in class, they had them record an oral presentation using PowerPoint and Loom or other tools like that. They weren't thinking about mental health at all. And yet the quality of the presentations went up, and I'm almost certain that stress and anxiety went down. In fact, when I interviewed a couple of people from the counseling center and said, what are some of the triggers? They both said right out the gate, oral presentations. And it stung because I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't been intentional in requiring it. Again, I think it's an important skill. I'm still trying to get all students in my class to participate, but I'm giving them some tools to help them get there, and recognizing that that particular activity wasn't central to the outcomes in my course. It's one that I've let go for other tools instead.
Now, thinking about this, I've talked to some folks who study history, and they say one of the mistakes we make is looking at history through our present lenses. But probably one of the mistakes that we make, the president, is looking at our present situation based on our past experiences where the shoe doesn't fit anymore. So what's a message for parents and teachers? Well, that's the way it was when I was a student, so just suck it up and, do it. What things should we be more aware of? That's probably not the way to deal with it, is just to tell them to deal with it.
So I will say one thing we're not advocating, which is just lower the bar and make it easy for them. But we're also not saying just suck it up. Steve and Bonnie and I aspire to be high expectation, but high support and high concern or high love teachers. You can simultaneously do all those things. So we don't have to choose between expecting a lot of our students and being very encouraging. And in fact, a number of studies have shown that the most successful teachers, especially in terms of how much students actually learn, do both. They expect a lot of students, but they also give them the direction and the comments that will show them the way there and give them some hope. I think parents can do the same thing. So we shouldn't remove all difficult obstacles from our children or from our students. Robert Bjork has talked about what he calls desirable difficulties. And real learning almost always involves some desirable difficulties. Our approach, though, is that we should look at each of the difficulties we create as teachers and then decide which ones are desirable or helpful difficulties that help students learn more and which ones are unhelpful. When you and I last minute change something and our directions aren't very clear and suddenly a student's hit with the deadline she wasn't anticipating, for our students with high anxiety, we found out in our focus groups, that's very stressful and very unhelpful. That's not a desirable difficulty. That's just ineptitude on my part. If I can strive to be better organized and more clear, I'm going to help all my students do better on the assignment, learn more, and especially help my students with mental health challenges.
No, you bring up something that I think as a parent and as a teacher, I want high expectations. I want them to be the best they can be just because I want them to be great. On the flip side, then I can go about it in a way that totally undermines that because my expectations and how I go about that don't meet expectation. I don't do it right. So what are some things you found, like, for example, the oral presentations? That's great, to understanding that maybe that stresses some students out, but there's an alternative. Are there some other things like that we can do?
One of the biggest changes I've made in the last 2 or 3 years in my teaching is a move toward what's called mastery-based learning. So in the past, I had a Bible dictionary test early on, maybe second week of the semester in my New Testament course. Turns out many of my students did not do very well on it, and it was worth 10% of the grade. Inadvertently, the message I was sending to a bunch of my students was, you stink at religion. It was discouraging, it was 10%, and you couldn't take it again. Knowing full well that most of them didn't really know the difference between Matthew and Mark or Galilee and Judea, I was moving on without doing anything to help them actually learn it. Now, old school people might say that's high expectation, and by golly, next semester, in some other course, they'll learn an important lesson from it. But in my course, I didn't do much to give them incentive to go back and to finally achieve that bar. Steve Hunsaker told me about spaced learning many years ago, so I changed that so that you did the same test 3 times about a month apart. As long as I was doing it, intuitively, I thought maybe instead of 10%, I'll go 2%, 3%, 5%, and if you get a higher score on the final time, I'll replace those lower scores. Unbeknownst to me, I was implementing what's called mastery-based learning. I was giving my students opportunity and incentive to actually master the material, something, frankly, we're notoriously bad at in American education. I once heard Saul Kahn say, in our monolithic approach to American education, we give the first test on, let's say the first chapter is on riding a bicycle, and half the students get a C or less. We move on to riding a unicycle. They crash, and we're surprised. when we did nothing to help those students who got a C or less on riding a bicycle to actually master riding a bike. So now I've just put in opportunities for students to resubmit things. They can't get quite as much credit, but it also makes it psychologically easier for my TAs and me to give a little tougher grades with some formative feedback. Formative because students then still have a chance to go back, resubmit it, and get a higher grade. So whether it's a test or a paper or some other kind of project, simply giving students opportunities to master what they don't initially master, we've found decreases stress, decreases discouragement, and increases learning for everybody. I think it's actually a higher bar.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. We're thinking if someone's being educated to be something we're really concerned about, like a doctor or fixing our car, we wouldn't want them to pass by that chapter on how to stitch you up and move to the next thing, because I want to be stitched up correctly, right? When it comes to that, not just I got to see, move on, and I really don't know how to do it.
And if they were pilots and they got a D on the landing the plane chapter, we wouldn't be saying, well, maybe you can make up for it in the customer service chapter, right? I want a pilot who knows how to land the plane.
Greeting you nicely, but it was going to crash when you land.
And yet that's not been the approach traditionally that we've taken. This is a simple change. There are a lot of advocates out there. Saul Khan, the founder of the Khan Academy, is one of the most passionate and articulate. But I've found not only does it boost learning, it especially helps boost learning for our students with mental health challenges.
You wrote, there's a chapter on awakening students' innate desire to learn. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, because I think I think everybody wants to learn at some point. It's just finding that motivation or that trigger that helps us. Yeah, this is actually interesting. It's fun to see when that light turns on. It's really discouraging when you can't seem to figure out how to make that happen.
I interviewed one student in a focus group, and this was during the pandemic when we had mixed modalities. She had 2 classes that were at 9 a.m., I think, on campus. One she had to walk all the way across campus to get to, but in that class they had built a sense of community. And the other was online, and we are so grateful that we have online tools, and I'm so grateful for our online tools that let us extend educational opportunities at BYU Idaho to people around the world. So it wasn't a competition of modalities, but in this particular synchronous online class, remote class, they didn't do much to build community. She said it was harder to wake up, open up her laptop and start class at 9 a.m. in that class than it was to get up early, shower, and walk across campus to the class that had a sense of community. That was really telling to me. What a difference it makes to students when they feel like, I want to be here. I think the teacher cares about me. I like my teammates in this group of 4 that the teachers help create for me. Or I see the relevance of what I'm learning. Or I don't have an insensitive religion teacher who started the class with something that sent the message I'm bad at religion. But instead I started the class with something that helped me succeed earlier, even as the professor raised the bar. All those kinds of tactics foster what we call intrinsic motivation, and the studies are pretty clear. Students learn more when they learn because they want to rather than because they have to. But they're also clear, students experience less anxiety and less depression when they're learning because they want to, not just for the GPA.
Not so stressful. Well, you brought up a point I thought was really interesting. You know, that first day of class, traditionally, I remember all the way back, paper, now it's not paper anymore, it's all online. But here's the syllabus, here's what you need to do to get an A, okay, we'll see you next time, read these 3 chapters, and you're off. You say, maybe there's a better way to introduce students into our classes, and we probably carry this off into other real life situations. That introduction kind of changes the game of what it's supposed to be like.
In fact, I read the Heath brothers book, The Power of Moments, and it got me thinking, well, what are we doing with the beginning and ending of classes and semesters? Syllabus day is not the beginning you want for a powerful, inspiring, engaging learning experience. So over the years, I've made some significant changes. Honestly, I can't remember which ones I've got in this first book and which ones are in the second book, a textbook for this course we teach our new teachers here on campus. But I think that the chapter is called Killing Syllabus Day and Making Over the Syllabus. So I begin the first day of class now with something substantive, but then I back up and I form groups of 4 and make sure one person in that group, at least, if not 2, has read the syllabus and maybe even taken the syllabus quiz. I let them take the syllabus quiz with people in their team and say, but don't just give each other the answers, help each other understand the stuff. They need to understand the ground rules to succeed. I let them take the syllabus quiz multiple times and retain the highest score because I want them to know the rules of the game. But the very first thing I do after I create those groups is say, take 3 or 4 minutes and get to know each other and exchange phone numbers. Because the research is powerful on the impact of community, a sense of belonging. And when students have somebody they can text who's not a professor but a classmate, they're much more likely to text after class and say, I don't understand what's going on. And then that first day of class, I say, would you show each other what's due today? Would you show each other the course in the learning management system? And then I ask, have you got any questions? I end up talking about the syllabus for maybe 2-3 minutes max, instead of half the class or more. It was my least favorite day of class. It had to be my students' least favorite day of class. Not only did they learn the stuff better, they're simultaneously building a sense of community, and it frees up time for me then to do some engaging things on that first day of class, and then foster intrinsic motivation by asking students, what do you want to get out of this class? In my religion classes, I ask a question like these. How could you use what you learn in this class to bless the lives of other people? And what if your goal were to do that, to help somebody who hasn't yet found the covenant path or is straying from it, find it and stay on it? How will you approach this course differently than if you were just focused on the A? By the way, then I have them post on a tool like Padlet. Everybody, even the students with high anxiety and introverted and slow to make a comment, everybody posts. And now suddenly everybody's participated. So on that first day of class alone, we've invoked almost every strategy we identify in the book.
That's one thing I do enjoy is, traditionally you ask a question, one or two people raise their hands, but if you have some methodology of everyone responding in a non-intrusive way, I'm that person that listens to everybody else before I raise my hand. I wait. So I think, okay, if I put myself in the seat, I'm not one of those people who's going to be, contributing much to the class. So when would I and how could I? And so I think those are some great tips to help people out.
I'm sure you've experienced this, Brian, but I've seen many of the best comments each semester come from students most reluctant to make them. So even before I was thinking about mental health at all, I was thinking, how can I draw in those students and frankly, keep people like me? I'm the opposite. I talk way too much. How can I help those students learn the skill of regulating our comments? I'm still working on it, I have to say, for anybody who's seen me in a class setting. But a simple tool like having people write raises what Doug Lamothe, the author of Teach Like a Champion, calls participation ratio. Now, I went to law school. I love calling on students. I love conducting the classroom conversation. But the fact is, it's usually only one student at a time speaking. And if we're not intentional and deliberate about democratizing participation more, it may be only 3 or 4 or 5 students all semester long who make the comments. But when we give students an opportunity to write, everybody thinks, even the students like me, make better comments if we subsequently have a conversation because we got to articulate them. But as the teacher, I can see what students have written, affirm the wisdom of what they've said, and then invite them to build on that comment. And I draw on students who otherwise wouldn't participate, but I also lower barriers of entry to conversation.
I want to ask you, this book that you put together would be a great resource just for BYU Idaho alone, but actually it's going to be put out there through a publisher. How did that come about, the interest beyond this campus and this particular topic?
So I from the get-go, wanted to write a book for all college professors. And a week and a half into writing, emailed James Lang, the author of Small Teaching and a number of other books, whom we'd had speak on campus. And in my former role, I got to help host those people who came. And I sent him a sample chapter and a half. And unbeknownst to me, Jim is the lead editor for a book on teaching and a teaching and learning series at West Virginia University Press. So he said, email this right now to this person. And within a couple of weeks, we had a signed contract. We were very blessed. But I think it was a testament not so much to our perceptiveness or work, but just the need that there's a void in the literature for this. People are concerned about this issue and frankly don't know how to help.
What do you hope that this research will do? I mean, ultimately, what's your goal, hoping that this will do for teachers, parents, students alike?
Well, our target audience is teachers. And I hope that teachers will just be more mindful of this issue and a little bit more creative. With just a bit of sensitivity, but a whole lot of intentionality, we can find tactics that improve learning for all our students without sacrificing anything, and simultaneously make life a lot better for students with mental health challenges. I've inserted a passage in my syllabus now that says something like, we know mental health challenges are real, and sometimes despite our best efforts, they catch up to us. Do what you can to stay ahead. Here's a place you can look for some resources that will help you on campus. But if they get the best of you, contact me. The sooner the better, and we can talk about things. You'll still need to do as much work as any other student to get an A, but there's a bit of flexibility. Frankly, that's what almost any boss certainly any boss at any place you'd want to work in real life would do if you had some major challenges. Frankly, it's what they'd be required by law to do if you had a diagnosed illness. Just sending that message, though, has put many students at ease who've never used that flexibility, but have emailed me and said, seeing that put me at ease in your class, knowing there'd be some help. I hope we can get more teachers just thinking about how the things they do affect their students with mental health challenges, and thinking about how they can teach in ways that will improve learning for all their students. Along the way, maybe some students and their parents will come up with some ideas. We've got a chapter on building emotional resilience that I think would be helpful for parents and for students for that matter. And it's a chapter on promoting wellness that, again, are some of the things, if I were a parent of a teenage child with mental health challenges, I would look to some of those chapters for some ideas on how I can help my child.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading through the rest of it. The stuff I've read so far has been fantastic. And I think it's one of those topics that the more we bring it out and talk about it, the more that both students and teachers can be aware and help each other out so it doesn't end up being such a difficult situation. Not going to solve all the world's problems, but man, it sure is helpful to have those resources. Rob, the book is coming out, Improving Learning and Mental Health in the College Classroom. Look for it in spring of 23. And Rob, appreciate you coming by and talking with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me back, Brian.